Hello, my name is James Buchanan. I was the 15th President of the United States and was also considered the worst president in our country's history. You don't really help, we'll show you why, but until now, here's this week's top 10 charts. And this guy down below, Joe Biden, he saved me. Who's Joe? My name's Robert F. Peters. Come on, man. Anyway, this is the Stock Market Jobber Report. Have a great week.
Yes, President Buchanan, your legacy of being the worst president in our country's history has now been surpassed because now we have Joe Biden, who is so crooked and so senile and so narrow minded. It's really kind of a shame. I mean, you were considered one of the worst presidents ever because you didn't stop the Civil War. That's kind of unfair. I mean, who else could have stopped the Civil War? I don't know if anyone could have. As a matter of fact, if Lincoln or if Sherman didn't take Atlanta when he did, Lincoln would have lost the election and Lincoln would be considered one of our worst presidents. But this corruption is so obvious, it's so out in plain sight. It's really just a disgrace. And I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. As an American, I'm ashamed. All right. So anyway, so these are our market principles, and we're going to go look and see these on some charts. Some levels are important. Some levels aren't. The important levels are called support levels, resistance levels. Sometimes these levels can stay intact for months or even years. I mean, sometimes a particular market likes a certain level. Just pick a number out of a hat, 53. It might find support at 53. It might find resistance at 53. Maybe 55, it doesn't care. Every time it goes through 55, it just moves right through it. So we're going to look at some of these. And we are going to start with the S&P. Start with the S&P 500. Now, in terms of like important levels and what's not important levels, you don't need to be a market guru to see that this black line here, 443.50, is important. It was resistance back in June. It was resistance in early July. It became resistance in August, or maybe early September, and has become support again. So there's a good chance we get a little bit of a rebound here. Now, why is this happening? Well, there's people who sold here who regret their decision and sold here. And when the price goes higher, they're like, man, I made a mistake. I'm going to buy my shares back if I can get them for the same price I sold them at. So they placed their buy orders at the level that was resistance. Resistance can turn into support because of buyer's remorse. Now, there's a good chance we get a little bit upside here. Why? Well, markets go down because there's not enough demand or buyers. Traders who want to buy notice the market has stopped going down. So they tell themselves there must be new buyers coming into the market. I want to buy, I better increase the price I'm willing to pay. I might be willing to pay 443.50, but if someone else is willing to pay 444, that's who the sellers are going to go to. So they have to increase the price they're willing to pay, and this starts a snowball effect. So things tend to bounce off of support because of a snowball effect. Things tend to sell off of resistance because of a snowball effect. It's like the exact opposite. You get sellers undercutting each other. So going forward, I'm looking for support this week around 444, 443.50, resistance up around 440, 452. We got the CPI coming up on Wednesday. The CRB index has really been up. Oil has been up. I think we could maybe get a number greater than estimated, and that would probably be negative for the market because it would mean the Fed is going to have to keep raising rates. Here is our technology sector ETF. And look here, I mean, you don't need to be a hedge fund trader or a guru to see. Look how important some of these price levels are. I mean, why? I don't know. But this is 176.50 was resistance at the end of 2021. It was resistance in June. It's become resistance again. People bought here and they regret their decision when the market goes lower. So they tell themselves if we ever get back up to my price, I'm going to sell and get out at break even. So if you have enough remorseful buyers placing sell orders at the level that was resistance, it becomes resistance again. Buyer's remorse can keep resistance intact. Here we have support becoming resistance. This is also because of buyer's remorse. People buy, the price goes lower. A lot of them say, man, I made a mistake. If I can get out of break even, I'm going to. So you have remorseful buyers placing sell orders at the level that was support. If there's enough, it turns into resistance. Support becomes resistance. Over here, we have the opposite. Resistance becomes support. Resistance, support, resistance, support. You can see that some price levels are more important than others. Look at this. This was support, became resistance and resistance. A year and a half later, it became support and support. For whatever reason, I don't know why, this particular ETF likes this level. So why would resistance become support? Well, people sell, then the price goes higher, and a lot of the sellers say, I made a mistake. I'm going to buy my shares back if I get them at the same price I sold them at. So if you have enough remorseful sellers placing buy orders, resistance turns into support. All right, I think Mr. Buchanan wants to come back on here.
See, I was born into a well-to-do Pennsylvania family in 1791, so therefore somewhat privileged. I graduated from Dickinson College and was gifted as a debater and learned in the law. I was elected 5 times to the House of Representatives and then, after an interlude, to Minister of Russia. I served for a decade in the Senate. I was Senator Polk's Secretary of State and President Pierce's Minister to Great Britain. My service abroad helped me get the Democratic nomination in 1856. Pardon me. It's been a long time since I've been awake. Mark woke me up for this. It's also kept me in the involvement in bitter domestic controversies. FYI, I probably have the best resume of anyone who ever became president. So providing over a rapid dividing country, I grasp inadequately the political realities of the time. In other words, I messed up. I relied on constitutional doctrines to close the widening rift over slavery. I failed to understand the North would not accept constitutional arguments which favored the South, and nor could I realize how sectionalism had realigned political parties. The Democrats split, the Whigs were destroyed, and given rise to the Republicans. Thus, in my inaugural speech, I referred to the territorial question as happily a matter but little practical importance, since the Supreme Court was about to settle it, speedily and finally. Yikes. Damn, that was a bad speech. Whew.
Okay. Here's oil I want to look at. I think this is going higher. It looks like we're just kind of taking a little bit of a break. My target is 93. See resistance, resistance. Markets tend to run into resistance at former peaks. It happened here. Here's a former peak. Happened here. Happened here. Support tends to turn into resistance. Support can stay intact. Why is it possible that a support level can have such precision? We're talking about a market that's worth trillions and trillions of dollars. Sorry, it's having a little glass of water here. So why is it that we can have such precision? Psychology. There are investors who sold here who regret their decision to do so when the market moves higher. They tell themselves, if this thing comes back to my selling price, I'm going to buy my shares back. So seller's remorse can not only turn resistance into support, it can also keep support intact for an extended period of time. You cannot understand this unless you look at it through the prism of psychology. If you try to look at this through the prism of whatever, oil stockpiles, what they're saying on CNBC, you'll never figure it out. Shut the news off, listen to the charts. Support becomes resistance because of buyer's remorse. Resistance becomes support because of seller's remorse. Resistance can stay intact because of buyer's remorse. Support can stay intact because of seller's remorse. We're looking at a graphical illustration of psychology. Now, we got the CRB coming up this week. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. We got the CPI coming up this week. Estimates are for 3.2, I think. I'm not really sure. This is an index that tracks commodities that I like to look at. It's up 12% in 3 months. So how does that equate to 3.2% annual inflation? Obviously, it doesn't. I don't trust the government. I don't trust the numbers. Back when I first started coming up, it was a big scandal in the Clinton administration where they manipulated the numbers because they wanted it to seem like Hillary care or healthcare didn't cost so much. So I think that the actual market is a better indicator than what the government is saying. Okay, Mr. Buchanan's going to come back in here.
And at this time, I was considered the most corrupt president in history. Of course, Joe Biden has thankfully and deservedly taken that title away. A House investigating committee wrote a long book about it, and there was a graft and bribery in government contracts, the civil service, the Congress itself. There were no bid contracts awarded to family and friends, postmasters siphoning off funds on the state level, judges who were bribed in order to naturalize citizens if they would vote Democrat, and so on. Boy, that sounds a lot like nowadays. Seems like everyone in my party was on the take. Mr. Biden probably read my biography. After all, he said he is a student of history, and maybe that's where his ideas came from. But then the war of northern aggression broke out, and everyone forgot about me. Too bad, you suckers.
Now, back in your day, there was controversies about banks. And here's what we really got to watch this week. This bank ETF. Notice how resistance has become support. The financial sector looks a little precarious. So the banks is the industry within the sector. This starts to break down, that's going to pull down the financials. That's going to pull down the broader market. If there's one thing to watch this week, it's probably this. What does KBE do? How does it navigate the $38 level? Oh, and here's a longer term chart, which I want you all to see. So here's KBE again. This is 4 years. Notice how when we went into this panic, where did we find support? At a level that was resistance 3.5 years ago. So some mark in memory. Important levels can retain their importance for a long time. So we get this big sell-off. There's panic in the banking sector. Where's it going to end? Oh, former resistance level. For whatever reason, $35 is important. So as we just saw, we're hanging out above that 38. If that breaks, I think 35 is the next stop. Going to have Mr. Buchanan in here again. And here's our financial sector. And we could see short-term support has become short-term resistance. Again, this is probably the most important thing to watch. Different sectors run the market at different times. I would like to say different sectors are in the driver's seat at different times. I think this week it's about the financials.
As President Buchanan intervened to assure the Supreme Court's majority ruling in the pro-slave decision in the Dred Scott case, he acceded to the Southern attempts to engineer Kansas's entry into the Union as a slave state under the Lecompte Constitution, and angered not only Republicans but also Northern Democrats. Secondly, he honored his pledge to serve only one term and supported Breckinridge's unsuccessful candidacy in the 1860 presidential election. He failed then again to reconcile the fractured Democrat Party amid the drudge against Stephen Douglas, leading to the election of Republican and former Congressman Abraham Lincoln. Now, thirdly, Buchanan's leadership during this lame duck period before the American Civil War has been widely criticized. He has simultaneously angered the North by not stopping secession and the South by not yielding to their demands. He supported the ineffective Corwin Amendment in an effort to reconcile the country. Now, fourthly, which was probably the worst and harks back to Afghanistan myself, he made an unsuccessful attempt to reinforce Fort Sumter, but otherwise refrained from preparing the military. So his failure to forestall the Civil War has been described as incompetence. We've heard that quite a bit lately, as he spent his last years defending his reputation. Could you just shut the fuck up, sir? You have no right to say all these things about me, even though I did them all. You got to just come on, man. Whoa, Did I just take that from Joe Biden?
And we got to really keep an eye on this. These are yields, 10-year yields. If this thing breaks 430 and gets to 440-ish, it's going to be really kind of bearish for the markets. Higher interest rates are bearish for stocks because when interest rates are higher, it causes companies to spend more money to operate because they're spending money borrowing in these short-term overnight agreements or these short-term agreements to pay for their operational expenses. They don't just take money out of the cash register. They borrow it from big banks. So if the rates go higher, that money gets more costly. That takes right out of the bottom line. The other thing too is if you get higher and higher rates, it takes competition away from the stock market. If you can get a guaranteed rate of 5%, it's like, whatever. I don't want to risk being in the stock market. So higher rates give the stock market a competition. So that's another reason why they're bad. All right. Mr. Buchanan wants to come out again.
I had a close relationship with my friend William Rufus King, and it became a popular target of gossip. King was an Alabama politician who briefly served as vice president under Franklin Pierce. We lived together in Washington boarding house and attended social functions together from 1834 until 1844. Such a living arrangement was then common, but that bitch once referred to the relationship as a commune. Andrew Jackson called King Miss Nancy. My Postmaster General Aaron B. Brown referred to Mr. King as my better half, my wife, and Aunt Fancy. They were so mean. Isn't that a shade of blue festive? Many scholars think I was gay, and after all, I probably was. Me and Rufus really liked each other a whole lot, and I was the only bachelor president.
Cool, dude. So anyway, so this chart of Apple shows this concept of gap down, gap up. You've probably heard gaps refill, all right? And it's true, and you can see it here. What's one of the main reasons why we have resistance, which we discussed? Well, you have remorseful buyers trying to get out at break even after the price goes lower and comes back to where they bought. When you gap, there's no trading. We closed here, we opened here. There's no trading at these price levels. So if there's no trading, then just by definition, there's no one who bought is going to try to sell on the way up. So when the buyers start to think, gee, this move is a little overdone, I'm going to go in there and try to buy some shares. Well, guess what? There's not a lot of sellers to buy from. So the buyers are forced to pay higher prices. They have to be willing to pay a premium, and this forces an uptrend. So gaps tend to refill. It's an old Wall Street expression, and it's true. Now, on the downside, if we get a fast move up, there's a good chance when we come back the other way, we get a move quick. It's the opposite. Here we go through these levels so quickly, there's not a lot of time for there to be remorseful sellers who are trying to buy on the way down. So you rip through prices really fast, you just don't have a large concentration of buyers underwater who are trying to sell. If you rip up through levels really fast, you don't have a large concentration of remorseful sellers who are trying to buy. So I like to do lessons in real time. This is uh, September 10th. This is a real time lesson. I'm not showing you what happened like 5 years ago. So if this thing starts to respond or rebound, and we got the Apple meeting this week, there's a good chance it goes right back up really fast. When markets like levels, they hang out of them. They reverse off them. They break through them. When markets don't like levels, they just move through them like they're not even there. All right, Mr. Buchanan. Watching this for a potential trade here. Dollar General, very oversold. at support. COVID low was 125. The recent low has been 125. It might sound like, hey, man, that was 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. How could it be still important? But this is the way the market works. Sometimes price levels can stay intact and be important for a long time. Look at this level here, 150, was support for pretty much 6 months in 19. Then it became support again earlier this year. But we get this big sell-off. We get really oversold. We get to a support level. It's a good chance that this thing rebounds. So I'm going to be watching this. All right, I'm going to bring out Mr. Buchanan one more time, and then I'm going to call it a night.
Though I predicted that history would vindicate my memory, historians have criticized me for my unwillingness or inability to act in the face of secession. Historical rankings of presidents of the United States, without exception, place me among the least successful presidents. When scholars were surveyed, I ranked at the near bottom in terms of vision and agenda setting, domestic leadership, foreign policy leadership, moral authority, and positive historical significance of the legacy. Boy, I wonder if there's anything left for me to destroy. According to the surveys taken by American scholars and political scientists between 1948 and 1982, I ranked every time among the worst presidents of the United States alongside Harding and now Joe Biden. Thank you, Joey B. It's been a pleasure. Hope you guys have a great day. And this was Mark's Top 10. Professor Mark will lead you to glory. He won't steal from you like I stole from everybody. I was a bastard.
All right, thank you. Here is my bio. My favorite thing on here is I rescue guinea pigs. And I bitch about politics, but I have more fun rescuing guinea pigs. Okay, everybody, thank you so much, and I will see you soon.